Hi there. I'm Julia Kelly, talking to you with the ladies of First Draft, Mary Chris Escobar and Alexis Anne, and we're talking about critique partners tonight. So we're going to jump right into it and go ahead and introduce ourselves. Alexis, if you want to go ahead and start.
I'm Alexis Anne. I write erotic romance, and I'm drinking whiskey.
Good woman. Mary Chris.
I'm Mary Chris Escobar. I write women's fiction, and I actually have a really interesting drink. I'm drinking beer, but it is a homebrewed beer. My husband brews his own beer, and it is actually a Jane Austen-inspired beer. So it's brewed with spruce and some other good stuff.
Awesome.
So it's Spruce Almighty.
You have a much more sophisticated drink than I do. I'm drinking a Taj Mahal right now. I'm Julia Kelly, by the way. I write contemporary and historical romance. Clearly, the drink's more important. I'm drinking a Taj Mahal. I just had a curry, so it seems fitting. So we're going to jump right in and start by talking about critique partners. It's something that's kind of popped up a few times. I know with a couple of us, people asking how you find a critique partner and how you build a relationship with critique partners. So this is kind of a chat tailored directly to them, and hopefully will be helpful for a lot of people. So I just want to kind of open it up and define what a critique partner is exactly, and we might all have kind of slightly different answers. So we'll see. If you want to, we'll just go around like we did with introductions. Alexis, if you want to start.
Okay, critique partner to me, I guess, is someone who is going to read your work and has a critical eye, not only for the entire plot, but each character's arc, your writing technique, and can give you both good and bad feedback for what you should be keeping because you're doing it well, and what you need to be working on to improve your work.
Okay. How about you, Mary Chris?
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. I think, one of the biggest things that I'm looking for is another set of eyes on my work, because as the writer, you don't necessarily see words you're repeating, or maybe where the story falls apart, or where someone falls out of the story because some detail you gave didn't work with another detail. So, I think for me, I'm always looking for someone who can tell me those things, really honestly. So you want a critique partner who can, just like Alexis said, kind of tell you what is right, what you should absolutely keep, and kind of what caused them to stop or pause or hiccup in what they were reading and kind of took them out of the story, because you want someone to be really honest with you about those things. So that's really important.
I think what you said was very important, was you want someone who can be honest with you without trying to take over your work, and that's a problem that comes along sometimes.
Right, yeah, very true.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that critique partners are kind of few and far between, or at least they have been for me. You guys are my critique partners. So I think the most important thing is there's a long relationship that you build with somebody, and it's kind of a work in progress constantly as you grow as a writer. But it is a kind of specific relationship. I wouldn't send what I send to you guys to anybody else, because it's usually work that's very much in progress. Sometimes Alexis has gotten my literal first draft of whatever I've just written the day I wrote it, and just got it with typos and clauses that don't make any sense, and she's making hands like this, just to see if an idea is going to work. It's not just kind of the completed draft where you can say, oh, this is almost like what I would want it to be if it's a book. Tell me how you feel about it. It's really getting into kind of the nitty-gritty, and they get to know your process and can kind of walk you through what's working and what's not working, or at least that's how it works for me. So maybe jumping off of that, with you two, is there something different for you? I know some people call them beta readers, some people call them first readers. Talk about first readers and beta readers versus critique partners, at least for your writing.
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. For me, a beta reader is kind of like a test reader. This is what I consider to be a fairly close to finished product. Read it. If you were to pick this up at the library, if you were to download this to your Kindle today, what would your reaction be? As opposed to a critique partner, who's somebody who is working with you throughout the process of creating this work of fiction.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And to that instance, I think it's really great that we're doing this talk together because I think the two of you, kind of do a little bit more of that critique partner thing. I tend to finish an entire draft and then send it to probably more of a beta reader. I've kind of coined the term, and you guys have heard me use it. Like you guys are like my alpha betas. So like, I have a really small, group that I would send that very first rough draft to, and then I think of a first reader as maybe a slightly wider circle that still isn't huge, but is maybe what I feel like is a complete work minus copy editing, and I would send it to a wider group there, knowing that it's pretty much done, but knowing they might catch, I don't know, something like I had a date wrong, or something that kind of everybody had missed, almost more of a proofreading sort of thing.
Yeah.
But for me, I definitely think beta reading is that first, like, I always do a read through on my own of a finished novel, but I think the beta reader is really that pretty rough, like, no copy editing. I really kind of want to know if it's working.
Yeah, I think for me, beta reading is again the more complete document, and sometimes I'll send that to critique partners as well. But it's really, the polishing may not be done, but kind of my idea of what the structure and the characters look like is there, and then hopefully people like the plot, like the characters. They can tell me this doesn't feel quite right, or I really like what you did here, but it doesn't reflect kind of the way that you've set this person up. And it's those kind of hiccups in continuity and hiccups in characterization that I find really helpful at that stage. I don't find that with the work in progress stuff, because I go back and I revise and I edit and re-edit and re-edit on top of the edits so much. That's kind of stuff that I'm trying to work out at the point where I send things to Alexis, and I think that the beta reading is to make sure that all that came together in the way that I hoped it did. So, and then there are also times where people will just say, "Can I read something?" And you say, "Okay, yeah, this is basically, I think this is pretty much the way I want it to be." Send it off and see if they like it. So it's a little flexible.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I was going to mention is, because your critique partner sometimes sees your draft a couple of times, or they've seen it in a really rough state, they don't necessarily have a fresh set of eyes anymore. So it's nice to be like, okay, my critique partner's looked at this, I've fixed it, I think it's right now, but I need someone else to look at it who maybe isn't as in-depth, isn't going to necessarily tear apart what I'm doing, but they have a fresh set of eyes and they can point out where maybe I still am going wrong, or something still isn't working, or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And I could see, like, where a critique partner could almost start to kind of get in your head as the writer, and so like both of you could potentially be missing some things as you work through, parts of the draft. So I think it is important to have, like you said, that new, fresh set of eyes that hasn't seen it, in 3 different iterations, who can say, "Oh, wait, like, you guys know this so well, you didn't realize that this piece was missing." So I definitely think both are important in that way.
I think that's especially important if you have the type of relationship where you will work out characterization, or you'll talk something out, even if it's over text message or at a conference or whatever. If you have conversations about those characters, it can be really difficult sometimes to separate yourself from what your critique partner is attempting to do with her work and then what it actually comes out as on paper. And sometimes it's the subtleties, because with romance and with women's fiction, what we write, it is so based on the nuances of the character driving the story. It can be a little difficult sometimes to pick those things up when you've gone over things over and over and over again. So I think you're right. Those beta readers are really important, just as a, hey, is this actually did I achieve what I meant to do when I set out to write this book? So one of the big questions that I get, and I actually got it this weekend and was happy to talk to somebody about it, was how you find your critique partner. And a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to answer this because I didn't have a critique partner. I met you 2 in July at RWA. So how do you recommend people find their partners? And if somebody wants to describe how we met also, I feel like I'm telling people about how I met, a spouse or significant other. But if somebody wants to throw that story in, you're more than welcome to as well. Otherwise, I'll fill in the gaps. So.
Well, I feel like one thing that we've all mentioned since July at RWA was that each one of us came into RWA with a mission. And mine was to connect with people who could somehow help me further my career. I couldn't like quite form what that meant yet. Apparently, it meant my critique partners in my writing group. And I think each of you have mentioned that too. So I think we just kind of all gravitated toward each other eventually. And when we got to that ice cream social, Julia just, because the contemporary romance writers had an ice cream social, and we were there all kind of having met over and over again over the first day at RWA, and Julia just kind of appeared with us, and we all thought that she came with somebody, and we've never let her go.
I'm held captive and I can't get out. Help.
Which is important because you're the glue that has held us together.
Yeah. I'm the nosy one who's always on email and just like, hey guys.
It's like we knew we needed you. It's like we knew it wouldn't work if we didn't befriend you.
That's my deep love of ice cream probably helped. So.
Yeah,
you're the one that emailed and text messaged and made sure we all stayed in contact. So
I'm happy to do it. Definitely. Yeah, I agree. I don't have a great answer to that. Like, I didn't have an answer to that question at all until last year. So I guess it would come down to, and I will say that, you know, I have taken local writing classes, and I am part of a local writing group as well. And I've had some critique groups that have grown out of the very first writing class I ever took. You know, for a little while, some of us kept trying to meet and kind of continue what we were doing in class. So I think while that isn't kind of what worked for me long term, that can be a good place to start. You know, if you're kind of looking for that, I think, you know, a short-term writing class, I did mine through a local community center, you know, I think that sometimes can work. For me, it was just about finding the right group of people, and I agree. I went to RWA. I don't even know that I knew specifically what I wanted to get out of it. I just knew that I had, you know, paid good money to go, and I was going to get something out of it. Like I don't think I knew what. I was just like, I'm going to throw myself into this fully, and I'm going to make sure that I, you know, don't leave without something. And I'm not sure I knew what that something was, but it was definitely kind of finding the right writing group. You know, and I think for me, even though I'm not, women's fiction is kind of maybe a tangential, I don't know about the whole genre thing, but like finding people in sort of my same genre who are writing the same type of things about, you know, women and women's journeys and romance, and I think that was really what helped me clue in to, or really feel at home in a writing group. So I guess it's just really finding that group that you feel at home in.
Yeah, I walked into RWA with one goal in mind, and that was to meet people, and out of meeting people to find a critique partner, at least one. And it was a conversation I had had with my agent, who I was going for the first time, and she said, well, you know, the thing you probably are going to get most out of this is a support network and a group, since I had an agent already and we were on submission. And so I walked in thinking, you know, me being type A me, saying, I'm going to find a critique partner. And it's so much more organic than that, because it's a melding of personalities, I think, more than anything else. And I think each of us have distinct personalities and distinct working styles and writing styles and paces that you work at. But I think that it's a relationship that has to build. And we happened to luck out being at the same ice cream social together, and me accidentally sneaking into the group because everybody just thought I was there with somebody else. And I remember specifically being like, well, I'm sitting with these kind of cool women. Maybe I should like ask if anybody wants to get a drink. And Mary, Chris, and I got a drink, and then that kind of spiraled into lunch with everybody and meeting up with each other and having, you know, beer and pizza at some point, and just building the relationships and sticking around. And whether we had become critique partners or not, I think that would be valuable, because at least you make that connection and you meet another person in the industry, and they have experiences, and those can be really valuable things. But I was very lucky that really very early on in RWA I met you guys, and that you have been fantastic critique partners. And one of the reasons you've been fantastic critique partners is because you can give me criticism, and negative criticism as well as positive, in a very constructive manner. And I think that's one of the most important things, that you don't know until you really get in and start working with somebody whether that's going to happen or not. So maybe we can talk about criticism and the positive and the negative and how you deal with it, and maybe we'll hold off on when it isn't working for a little bit, and we'll talk about kind of how you handle somebody looking at your work, and also how you handle critiquing somebody's work when you know they have worked so many hours over something and maybe it isn't quite working. So who wants to jump in? I know. Take a hard question first. Go, Mary Chris.
I'll take it. You know, I think, again, kind of going back to that very first writing class that I ever took, sort of when I was figuring out that maybe I wanted to be a writer, I happened into a class that was really, really well led. And I think it was the only time the instructor ever taught at that particular community center, and he was right out of an MFA program, and he was really wonderful. He was very committed to, when you gave criticism, one, you had to always say something positive, and secondly, your criticism couldn't be, I don't like that. Like, you could never say, I don't like that. It had to be, I don't like that because, or I think this because, or this took me out of the story, or this feels awkward because, but you were never, like, you had to read the work and you had to come in with something constructive to say. The other great thing was, it was, you know, you couldn't repeat what someone else had said, and so you had to go into that with a lot of positive and a lot of, you know, constructive criticism as well. So it really forced you to look at things with a critical eye. But I think two things, that being one kind of a formative experience for me of, like, there's always something positive, and you always highlight that, as well as, you know, very constructively, not just saying, like, I don't like that, but, like, I don't like that because, like, you have to kind of always fill in that blank of why it doesn't work for you. So I think that's part of it. I also think the other part of it is always acknowledging that, like, you're offering your critique as one reader, like, and sort of being very respectful of the fact that the author's vision might be really different than what you mean. And I'll give a really short example of that. In that same first writing class I took, and I've talked to you guys about this before, I think, but when I workshopped the first chapter of my very first novel, and this woman thought my character was an alcoholic.
Yes, I remember the story.
Yes, which was a little hard. That was some criticism that was hard to take, because she probably didn't drink any more than I do, and so I was like, interesting, interesting critique. But I was able. The other thing about that critique format is you weren't ever allowed to say anything until the end. So people offered their critiques to you, and you could not immediately respond, which is a good thing. But, you know, here she is saying, like, I think you're writing this book about this alcoholic, and I'm like, no, really, she's just a 20-something, like, who maybe had a little too much to drink one night. Like, this isn't really where I intended to go. And while I didn't change anything about that scene or how much she drank, I did change, like, a pretty major point in the plot. You know, I wanted to figure out a reason why she might have had too much to drink that night, and why, you know, weddings might be particularly hard, and it ended up being because her mother had passed away, and, you know, so it was really pivotal. Like, there was a critique that didn't immediately make me change something, but actually made me rethink sort of one of the key elements of my novel. So I think coming at it from a point of being constructive and, you know, not necessarily attacking the writing, and knowing that the person's vision might be different than what yours is.
Yeah, that is a fantastic answer. Really encompasses everything.
Sorry, on.
No, but you hit on all of the major points. Instead of it being a writing class for me, it was actually my high school English teacher. Because it was a dual enrollment class, I had to take creative writing through the same teacher, and she was amazing, and she taught us all of this stuff, and it was the same kind of stuff. You need to critique constructively. There has to be a because. You have to have something positive to say about everything, because there is something positive to say. All of those things are fantastic. The other thing I might be able to add to that conversation is that, I don't know, I think you covered everything.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to tackle the constructive criticism part of it as part of my day job. Yeah, as part of my day job, I'm a TV news producer, and I get a lot of very young talent, some people fresh out of college, and one of my jobs is to mentor them, and some of that is taking some of the veneer off of being a reporter, and some of that is being mean to them for the first time, and it's not mean. is maybe difficult to take when somebody for the first time says, you know what, your work isn't a gold star. It's in progress, and you need to figure out what you need to do. And I'm going to help you, and I'm going to tell you once or twice. But if you start making the same mistakes over and over again, it means you're not really paying attention. And so that's less of the applicable to writing side. More of it is learning how to toughen yourself up and to take some of that constructive criticism in the same way that my mentors in being a producer taught me how to deal with rejection, deal with the fact that you're going to have, especially with social media, an audience that is very vocal, and when you do something that they don't like, especially around a very sensitive topic, they're going to let you know, and they're going to let you know loudly. And that can be really tough to take sometimes. But I think it's worth stepping back. It's kind of almost like the 10-second rule that they tell you about when you're a kid, and they don't want you to, get angry and blow up. I think it's worth stepping back for a moment, saying, okay, what is it that made this person say this? And hopefully everything is constructive, because if the criticism coming to you isn't constructive, that's a very different issue, and I think it's one that you shouldn't have to put up with. But sometimes it's difficult to hear somebody say, you know what, I don't know what you're trying to do with your main character, she's just not likable. That's one of the hardest things, I think, to hear, is that your characters aren't likable, or there's something off with the way that you perceive a scene, especially when you're talking about things as intimate as love, romance, sex, whatever emotional baggage all the characters come along with. But it's worth toughening up, and it's worth kind of asking questions, and why did you see that way, and why did you think that, and trying to stay kind of almost on the passive side, not get defensive, because this person is reading what is possibly a work that isn't completely polished. Thank you, Alexis. They're reading something, and it takes time. It takes a lot of time to critique somebody's work. I'm a fast reader, but when I come through and I read somebody's work to critique it, I'm slowing down and I'm writing comments and commenting heavily. I mean, the comment bubbles on Microsoft Word are like my favorite thing, because it allows me to have a very real, immediate reaction to somebody's work, as opposed to, and this was something I learned, as opposed to coming away and just writing down a list of things that I thought needed improvement. You can react very immediately to somebody's work, and sometimes it's difficult to read those things, but if you can step back and say, okay, is there something that's fundamentally just something that I think is necessary to this story that the person is not getting, and maybe that's one reader's perspective, or is it there's something wrong with the way that I'm presenting a character, presenting an idea, writing a scene? Maybe I can take another approach, or maybe somebody says will trigger, like you said, Mary Chris, some sort of moment where you think, oh, I can actually explain and justify that behavior, or why I decided to put that in as an author. So I think it's tough, especially with writing, especially when you are unpublished and you're first starting out and you do this very solitary thing where you are constantly in your own head. And even if you have, a support network of Twitter friends or whatever, writing groups or workshops, it's a very quiet profession, and it's a very personal one, because it's something that you're creating, and it's something that there's no space between you and the paper. And I think that on some level you have to open yourself up and just learn to handle it and learn to deal with it. And if you can't do that, maybe a critique partner isn't for you, but I think that critique partners are really important, and I think it's something that you need that feedback, and you need to make sure that somebody's looking at your work, so it isn't just you kind of sitting in a vacuum, not knowing how people are going to respond, and if you have some major issues with your work. So that's kind of my take. It's toughen up, but do it in a positive way, and do it for other people in a positive way too. There's nothing wrong with giving not harsh critiques, but honest ones, very honest critiques. If something doesn't work, and if you think that something is detrimental to somebody's manuscript, you can say it. And I think that couching it in a positive way or offering it as a suggestion is a really smart way that your professor had you guys workshop those pieces, Mary Chris. I think that makes a lot of sense, because then you're actually offering some sort of solution, or at least an idea.
Yeah, I agree, and I think about this a lot, because kind of you were drawing a comparison, Julia, with your work and my work. My day job, my non-writing job, is advising students, and some of that is ripping band-aids off. I mean, some of that is saying, you need a 3-6 3.7 to get into nursing school, you have a 2.5. Like, that's hard. But there's always a way to do that where I feel like you're saying it in a constructive way and in a, almost a kind way. Like, sometimes it would be, I think there's this idea that we want to be really nice to everyone and not say what's wrong with their work, but that's not actually the kind thing to do for someone that you care about and you want to see them prosper as an artist or as a person. And so I think for me, in giving criticism, that's been where I've had to get in my life, is realizing like what seems nice is not always what's the kind thing to do. You can always give criticism in a way that's constructive, but to not say, I fell out of your story here, like I totally lost it, or, I don't think your character would do this. If you think that and you don't say it, then that's just wrong. I mean, you have to say that to someone who's asked you to critique their work. And I think you have to do it in the kindest way that you can, but it's wrong in some ways not to do it.
I had a thought while we were talking, and that's about what is a constructive critique, because I think the three of us have been, we're kind of on a different level. Not, that comes out wrong. We have a different experience than maybe some people. We're on a different level, man.
We think very highly of ourselves on this podcast, on this video thing, whatever it's called.
But we each have come from backgrounds where we've had to take critique in some capacity, where someone has had to rip a Band-Aid off, or someone has had to take you down a level. It's just been part of our work experience up until this point, and that's not necessarily true of everyone who's watching this right now. So when we say give a constructive critique, they're sitting here going, what does that mean? So I think maybe it would be helpful if we just cleared that up a little bit. And to me, a constructive critique is when, I'm looking at, okay, let me think of an example. Your character not being likable. What I used to get from other non-writers was, she's not likable, maybe you should make her do this or do that. That's not constructive, that's not helpful, as opposed to what I would expect from the two of you, which is your character's not coming across very likable. Here are 3 examples where I went, ugh. If she had done this instead, or if her motivation was outward instead of inward, or some sort of thoughtful response to it, then I can sit here and go, okay, now I see where I was going wrong with the character, why you had that reaction. Was it what I was going for, or did I have some sort of other thing going on and I lost the character there? It gives me something I can actually work with. It's not criticizing me as a writer. I'm a terrible person. I don't know how to put words on a page. It's giving me a place where maybe I'm not doing it effectively and giving me an option for what I want to think about for correcting it.
I agree. I think that the why is the really important part. Mm-hmm. Why did you have that reaction, or why do you think this isn't working? If you have a character who seems to be carrying around a huge amount of emotional baggage and that's not allowing them to be a likable person, why is that the case? And what is it that you can do to make them more sympathetic, or what is it that you need to do to kind of make things click? And I think that's really that's the key. It's the explanation as well as the I didn't like this, or even worse. I actually think this is even worse. I loved it. Why did you love it? Tell me why you loved it, because God, I want to do it again. And nothing is less helpful than somebody going through your manuscript and saying, oh my God, I love this. This is fantastic. And you're just sitting there thinking to yourself, I know it's not there yet, and
you're just kissing my ass.
I'm more confused than I was before I sent this to you, because now I don't know what's genuinely good and what you're just kind of, I don't know, I've got no sway in the publishing world. Like, why are you trying to make me happy other than, I hope I'm a decent person? That's not helpful either. So I think the constructive criticism is really sitting there, and it is kind of like academic analysis. You sit there and you slowly take a work and you go through and you say to yourself, okay, why am I reacting this way, and what is it that's going to help this person? And then part of, I think, what's important is building a relationship with an author. I know when I first read both of your works, we didn't have the relationship yet, where I could sit down and say, okay, how does she want to present herself as an author, and what are the things that she's trying to achieve in this book? Because what works for an erotic romance is not going to work necessarily for a work of women's fiction. And so I think part of it is understanding that it's a process to get there, to the point where, you know, I can email Lexi and I can say, you know, I think that this isn't quite you yet, and here are the reasons why. So it takes time and it takes an investment, but it also takes effort on your part as a reader to sit there and say, okay, let me see what exactly is going on here and what this person is trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. There's another thing. This is a relationship. It's not a one-time thing, and it's give and take. And sometimes, like recently, I'm going to send you guys a lot of stuff, and I'm going to feel really bad because I'm just sending and sending and sending. But it's a relationship, and sometimes it's going to be heavy from my end, and sometimes it's going to be heavy from your end. This is an investment in all of our careers over the long term, and if it's not working out, it's not working out. You know, that relationship, you read her, I read her, she read me, it didn't work, we're going to move on. But like for the three of us, this is an investment, this is a relationship that is working, and so it continues to grow and build, and it's not reciprocal all the time, and it's not, you can't keep score in the background.
Yeah, it's ticking off boxes saying I sent her one thing and she sent me one thing and I sent her another thing and she sent me 5 things, and that's not okay. That's not going to work. Like, it's not keeping score. It's not any of those things. It is a relationship just like it is any other kind of close relationship in your life, and in a way it's closer than some because, again, you have a hand in what somebody is creating and in helping them figure out what it is that they want to present themselves as professionally. As well as an artist, because you want to sell books and you want to make a living doing this, and those things are really important. So I think that that's a really big, important point, that you know, if it's not working, it's not working, and it's okay to let those relationships go, but you need to approach it and take it seriously, because it's a very important relationship, and one that I think is hugely valuable, and you can't go about destroying these relationships. Please don't burn bridges with your critique partner. That'd be awful. Oh my God.
Yeah, and I think, you know, going back to something one of you said, like understanding like what someone wants sort of personally and professionally, like, you know, the thing about keeping score, like I'm pretty much on a 1 book a year, like 1 novel a year, maybe throw in a novella. Like that's just my schedule because of the demands I have outside of, you know, writing, and also just because of kind of my writing style. But you know, you can't keep score on that. So, you know, obviously, like Alexis has been working on a serial. Obviously, like, you know, a bunch of serials don't, you know, that's not even as many pages as like my 1 novel. So, like, you can't keep score in that way. And I think you have to know what someone is going for in their career, and that's why it's important to not just have people that you say, hey, please read this, and you don't talk to like any other time during the year, because, you know, I think it alleviates some of that of like, oh, well, I sent this, and like you sent, and it's easy, right? I mean, we do that. Like, we're like, oh, but I sent like 300 pages, and she only sent me 20, you know. But it's the idea of like, if you know what someone's overall goal is, it's not really about that. It's about them putting out the best product for what they're doing, you know, and what they're planning to do with their career.
How about the issue of dealing with somebody, the fact that this is somebody else's work and this is your work? And I know one thing that I hear a lot from people is, when I sent this to somebody, I felt like they were trying to rewrite my book.
Mm-hmm. I struggled with that before I found you guys, because especially with erotic romance, there are certain things like alpha males or BDSM, things like that, and certain people always want those elements in a story, and obviously I don't write those elements in my story, and I found people trying to rewrite my male characters as alpha males, and they're not alphas in a traditional overbearing male sense, and so it's important to find people who are okay with reading your stuff and not rewriting it in the way that they see it. I think that's a deficiency, not to be mean, on their part, of not being able to constructively criticize. They see something that they don't quite like, but they don't know why, and they can't quite vocalize it yet. So you need to be able to say, okay, this person isn't the person that I'm looking for as a critique partner, and move on from that relationship and just kind of absorb the fact that it didn't work out and move on and not dwell on it. it sucks when you don't have someone else to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, because those relationships are so important and because you do end up emotionally invested in people's careers, it can be really difficult to extricate yourself from those and not to feel like you're losing a huge part of you, but at the same time, you don't want somebody to be taking over what you're writing, and especially when it comes in a situation of undermining your confidence as a writer. I think that if anybody abuses you in any way, if anybody is nasty or toxic, I say run for the hills and do it in a quiet way. Small business, and it's tough to burn bridges in any business. I try not to do that regardless, but you have to be protective of yourself as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What about, do you guys have any rules for critique or suggestions for how people go about kind of maintaining a good relationship with your critique partner? I know we already talked about not rewriting people's stuff and presenting criticism in a constructive manner, but is there anything that you kind of think is kind of important bullet points?
I try to always ask if there's anything you're concerned with, if there's anything you want me to look out for, is there anything in particular that you want me to look at? Is this a critique where you want me to look at your grammar? Is this a critique where you want me to look at your character arcs? Or do you just want my opinion? Because if you're going at it from a different perspective than the writer, then you're already missing each other from the get-go. I always try to have something positive and something constructive to say, because otherwise then what were you doing there reading? You're not helping them. And then always have good communication before, during, and after. Like, it's like a marriage. If you don't have good communication, then it doesn't work.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. I think it can be helpful maybe, when you're first working with somebody for the first time to actually have some specific questions about your manuscript. And I think you probably need to do that less and less the more you work together. But, having some specific, I don't know, I want to know, I'm concerned about, the transition between chapter 3 and 4, does that work? I mean, if you have those specific questions, I think it's right to let whoever's reading for you know, that you have those questions. And then, not to be totally contradictory, but on the flip side of that is to also just be willing to take their kind of unguided opinions on what they're reading for the first time, because someone who picks up your novel, or novella or whatever it is, isn't going to have any questions to guide their reading. So, there's a piece of it where you also want a little bit of just what is your reaction to this? The first time reading it, what are you thinking at different parts of the story? So I think that's definitely part of the evolution of working with someone, is maybe you start out with some more specific questions, but you get to a level of trust where if you have a grave concern, you're I'm really worried about chapters 3 and 4, but also you just really want their kind of gut reaction to what you wrote, kind of without your guidance of where you think it might have fallen apart or not, because sometimes it's really different and not what you were expecting at all.
And this is where communication is really important, because if you do have good communication and something that your critique partner sent back to you hurt, then the communication should be there, and you can say, I don't understand why you hated my heroine so much, and these notes, I just don't get it. And then you can discuss it openly, and she can say, I don't ever want to see a critique like this again, and you go, okay, I'm not doing that again.
Right.
Because it is a relationship, and you're not always going to do everything right, and you have to be able to talk to each other about what does and doesn't work from each of your ends.
Mm-hmm.
I have two common sense ones. Ask permission before you send something to somebody. Not even permission, just say, hey, do you have time to look at something? Sometimes people don't, and I know this happened with you, Mary Chris, once. You were in the middle of some day job, crazy time, and it happens. And I've been traveling a lot this month, so I've been falling back on a couple of critique things that I will get to this weekend. I'm very excited about. But sometimes it can be tricky, and to not sit there and kind of be like, have you read my work? Have you read my work? Have you read my work? You have to allow that people are not only critiquing for you, but have families and day jobs and other things going on and other obligations, and they're also writing on their own as well. And there are a finite number of hours during the day, and sometimes as a writer you have to prioritize your own writing, and that's okay, and that's important. If something has a deadline and you're sitting there like, I need this back, let them know. And if they can do it, that's great. If they can't, maybe there's somebody else you can turn to. The other thing is, and this is something that I think is a really hard and fast rule, and it's never happened to me, but I've heard of other people having it happen to them. If somebody sends you their work, you are not allowed to act as a distribution point for other people. It can be, I don't care if it's your spouse, if it's your significant other, if it's your aunt, your mother, whoever, you have to have the author's permission to hand any of that work to anybody else. And I know, Lexi, when we first started working together, you said, sometimes I like to run things by my husband. Is that okay? Totally fine with me. I don't mind that at all. I like getting a guy's perspective on things, especially since he does read romance and he knows the business, and I think that's awesome. And I appreciated the fact that you asked me, because for me it's less of a big thing. I do like to know who's got my work, and just from a practical standpoint, just in case anything were ever to float out there and somehow wind up in an awkward situation. But more than anything else, it's a respecting the person that you're working with thing. And if you're ever going to ask somebody else's opinion, or God forbid hand off a manuscript to somebody else, don't do it unless you have the express permission of the author. It's a professional respect thing, and it's a creative respect thing more than anything else. I think that I've heard some horror stories, and I hope that they're not true, but I think that they are very important things to recognize. And that's whether you're a critique partner or a beta reader. If somebody gives you an advance copy, whatever it is, unless you have the permission of the author, just don't distribute it. It's just not okay. And it's not fair. It's not fair for them and for their work. So
I think that's more common with betas and ARCs, because so many people get their hands on them, and they just, woo, yeah, anyway. But side note here, I hope Second Chance Girl by Julia Kelly somehow makes it to market soon, because we were watching the draft a few weeks ago, and I kept going, oh wait, you didn't read that yet, Nate.
Oh, he's more than welcome to, by the way. I should probably send you a fresh copy. Second Chance Girl is the sports novella I wrote, and it centers around an NFL draft pick. Although he's not actually the main character at all. He's a secondary character, but that would be why. I keep getting text messages and tweets from people saying, oh, have you seen that movie about the draft? It's really awesome. I'm like, oh, I need to see it. I want to see it. I love the draft. It's one of my favorite things. So, yeah, and I appreciate the fact that he, you asked me before he reads it. So, it's common courtesy, and it's professional courtesy, and you wouldn't want somebody just walking down the streets of New York and handing your manuscript out. So why would you, just disseminate it without permission? So it's also your livelihood. If I pass copies of Tease out, which is the serial that Alexis has going right now, that's not making her any money, and that kind of defeats the purpose of having it for sale. So
yes.
I scribbled a note here, because you brought up while you were talking earlier about critiques that you like to use Microsoft Word to do your on-the-spot thoughts. And I have been struggling with it lately. I don't know what's wrong with my brain. I go through phases, just like with my reading. I go through phases. Maybe it's hormones, I don't know what. But sometimes I'm reading people's work, and I love to critique right in Microsoft Word. Put the comment tracking right in there. You get my immediate reaction. Sometimes I like to ingest it all, and I sit there and I stare at the paragraph, and I'm like, I know what I should write, and I can't. And I end up making extensive notes at the end of reading it. I don't know if I process things differently certain times of the year or what, but I do like to do a lot of extensive notes at the end of reading sometimes, as opposed to commenting in the Word document, and I don't know how the two of you feel about that.
Well, I recently got critiques from both of you, and because you're so awesome, from both of you, I had both critiques in the document and a kind of overall reflections about the work, and that was amazing. It was nice to get both. So I would say, and I like both. I like doing both as while I'm critiquing, because part of me is afraid while I'm reading I'm going to forget something, and I think I have recently kind of started the idea of commenting more in the document while I'm writing. I used to just keep a piece of paper and jot things down as I read, because I didn't want to forget anything. as I was reading, you know, if there was something where I was like, ooh, I don't quite get that, or I really like that, I wanted to make a note of it. And it really makes sense to me just to go ahead and do that on the document so that I'm not then transcribing my page of notes in. But I actually think there's a place for both. I mean, I think there's a place for the quick feedback of, I love this part, or I don't quite get this. But then there's the longer, like just to use an example on my novel that you both beta read for me, the kind of, as you went through, we're just kind of highlighting, like, I really liked this, or I'm not sure about this wording. And then the overall were things like chapters 2 through 4 slowed down. Like, you know, obviously, like, that's something that needs to be, like, just a note at the end. Like, you don't need to put a big bullet point over chapters 2 through 4 and be like, this was slow. That's not going to work. So I actually think both works really well. I love getting notes about kind of what you're thinking as you read. For example, I think it was you, Julia, you left some notes about, like, why my character, like, didn't have a will or something. I'm not giving too much of the plot away, but, like, you're like, why didn't he have a will? And I was like, that's really good. My character might have been thinking that. So I actually went back in and wrote into her internal monologue, like, why didn't he have a will? And so, like, sometimes those things can be really valuable because I want to know that my reader is thinking that as they're reading, because to the extent I can write something into my inner monologue that the reader is already thinking, that's just awesome. So I think those definitely have a place, depending on what the critique is.
I agree. I think with me, a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm often picking things up and putting them down again, like I would read any other book, and I would love to be able to just sit down and kind of consume a book in one shot, but the reality is that because critiquing takes a little bit more time, unless I have a completely free Saturday, which doesn't happen very often, I typically will kind of pick things up and put them down. I try to do it within the space of a week or 2 weeks, and one of the nice things is you can see track comments and the dates and times, so you can see kind of this was read as a chunk and this was read as another chunk. And then typically what I'll do is I'll go through and have that immediate reaction, which actually comes directly from my best friends in college. Used to take pencils and write in the margins of romance novels, usually very snarky things, because we weren't reading. This was before I knew that there were kind of good, really good romance novels, and so they were usually fairly generic and not great, although some of them were fun. And so I remember getting those comments back, and I sent something. I sent an early draft of Second Chance Girl to one of my friends because she had asked, you know, to read about the superhero, the sports romance that I was working on, and I said, well, this is what I have so far. If you want to take a look at it, go for it. You know, it's a work in progress. And she sent it back to me with in-line comments, and I just thought that was the greatest thing, because she said, oh, I really like this here, and it wasn't as in-depth as you guys would go, but it was even something like, I really like this, I can see you saying this, and things like that were kind of highlighted certain aspects of the character's personality that I liked, and I ended up bumping up because I was like, oh, this is the immediate reaction of somebody. I really like the end of note, or the end of the completed work comments. Also, I don't usually send such extensive ones unless it's a complete large work, because then I can step back and say, okay, what is it that this novel did, and what worked for me and what didn't work for me, and pacing usually takes a while to, of course, kind of reveal itself, and so those are things you can kind of step back and have less of an immediate reaction with, and I'll usually take a half a day to sit there and kind of think about what it is that somebody's done and presented to me. So I like getting both back. I like writing both. One of the things that cracks me up about reading both of your work is I know you both really well, so I can feel like I can put little, like, I don't know, notes of encouragement or sometimes ridiculously comment on Alexis's things because I know her really well, and they're in jokes. I hate the word wink. I think that winking, I actually was editing something of my own, and I had a character wink, and that's for you guys, because otherwise it never would have happened.
The secret jokes that start working their way into our work because of that, yeah.
They are piling it on now. I find so many winks at these books now. Y'all, it's not okay. But no, so it's nice to be able to kind of pop those things in as well, because I'm reading the work of my friends as well as my critique partners. So I like the immediate reaction a lot. But really for me it's a practical thing more than anything else. If I can't sit down for a solid amount of time and read through somebody's work, I want to be able to go back and say, oh, that's right, I really liked this, I really liked this. And the inline edits really help me as a critiquer pick those things out.
Definitely. I also know that you don't like Jell-O now, so I'm going to write that.
I hate Jell-O. Oh, I think it's like a somebody tried to describe to me what a Jell-O salad was, and I thought I was going to die. It sounds like, I just don't like the texture of Jell-O, so to me that sounds like truly the worst thing you could, oh.
I think I wrote, I think the first page of my novel includes the words Jell-O salad.
And I'm pretty sure my reaction was, what is that?
No, I think you were like, ew, I don't like Jell-O. Which is kind of what I wanted.
You're learning a lot about me on this Google Hangout right now.
I think I'm supposed to be writing Tease 3 this week, and I think on their weekend of sex toys, they're going to have some Jell-O in there now.
Ooh.
I just hate the texture. Oh, it's nasty,
and they
guys.
wait at each other.
Jell-O pudding. I can get behind. I'm so angry with you right now. But no, there are other things that I know I lean on smile a lot, the word smile. So every once in a while I'll get a snarky little comment from Alexis being like, they smiled again. I've definitely done that to Mary Chris with laughed. I know
Laughter,
laughed
yes.
problem.
Which at least we're happy. We're smiling and we're laughing.
Yeah, no, everybody's smiling and happy and everything's good. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was trying so hard not to swear in the mummy maneuver, and so what's his name, Cole, it says he swore under his breath, and Mary Chris's note was just have him swear, and I was like, no!
Just give up, fine. and that's the fun part. I mean, that's
I didn't know that you were trying not to have him swear. I was like, why isn't she just having him swear? She has no problem writing swear.
Yes, the mummy maneuver is very different than Storm Inside and Reflected in the Rain in the Tease series, guys.
I'm trying to write one book my parents can read.
Yes, maybe.
All right, got it. But this is, again, this is a perfect example of why it's good to kind of know what someone is working on. You know,
exactly.
Is it supposed to be PG? Is it supposed to be R? Like, you know, I'm sure either of you could rewrite my non-sex scenes in my books, 5 times over, but they're not supposed to be erotica.
Right.
So, right.
It's a different style, different type of writing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know one of my favorite comments I've gotten so far was very, very kindly, Alexis sent me a comment back on a manuscript that I was working on, and she said, I think the tone isn't quite right in this. It sounded a little like a historical, and it was definitely not a historical. It was a contemporary. And I went back and I read it, and I thought, oh my God, I've been reading and writing other historical stuff on my days off from writing this, and it's creeping into my... And I had no idea, I had no clue that I was writing in this totally different style, and went through and was like, okay, we're changing that. So it's helpful to get somebody sitting there being like, I don't think that's what you think you were doing.
Yeah, it is. My novel that I just finished editing, you both indicated that it was a little slow at the beginning, and you don't necessarily see that when you're writing. And then when I went back to edit, there was like 2 pages about a grilled cheese sandwich, and I was like, yeah, that's it.
Oh, but I love grilled cheese sandwiches.
Oh, and I wanted one really bad after 2 pages of it.
I was like, wow, she's really into this.
Yes, I think I can cover that in about a paragraph. I think
the grilled cheese sandwich is important, though. We should say, and you'll have to read the book to find out why it's important.
It is.
It was so early, and sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say it is important, not 2 pages important.
But at that point, it's still so early in your book that, as a reader, as your critique partner, I'm still getting a feel for what are you going for in this book, and it isn't until I got to the end that I was like, that was really slow in the beginning. Yeah. I'm gonna make a note.
Right. And that's
and then it's your job as the author to go back and look at those chapters and say, oh, this is why it's slow. There's 2 pages of grilled cheese.
Exactly.
Yeah, your critique partner isn't doing it all for you. You do actually have to still go back and look at the stuff. And I'm in edits for something right now, and I have to go back and look because to be totally honest, I'm on to working on something else now. I have no idea what I wrote. I'm not in the polishing stages, and that's when I read the thing 14,000 times. So, yeah, you're still going to have to do the work. And your critique partner is not there to rewrite your book, and the critique partner is also not there to edit your book. So.
No, and I think that's a really good point, and I think that's really key to keeping your voice as an author. Like, the critique partner is saying, it slowed down between these chapters. They're not going in and saying, you should cut this and this and this, and that's how you receive a critique but still keep your own voice. It's like, oh, okay, like I need to go back and look at those pages, but ultimately I'm making the decision about what stays and what goes. It's more like I'm just getting this alert, like I should probably look at that again. Like, there's probably a problem with something in there, but I think it's really key to keeping your voice as an author that you go in and you make those changes. You don't, that would be kind of a deal breaker if someone was like, I think you need to cut like these 5 pages, like, instead of just telling me like it slowed down. Or maybe not a deal breaker, maybe I really did need to cut the 5 pages, but like really wanting to totally chop up and rewrite something I think would be a sign of like not wanting, you want to be able to go back and make those chops and edits yourself to keep your voice intact.
Well, if nobody has anything to add, maybe we'll go around and kind of talk about what we're working on, and then we'll call it a night. It's been almost an hour, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, flown by. So maybe we'll start in the same order we started in. Alexis Anne, what are you working on? What have you got coming out?
I'm right in the middle of my new serial called Tease. Tease 1 and 2 are out, and I have 3, 4, and 5 left to write. It's fun. It's super hot, and I've had a lot of fun writing it. And on the side, I'm working on my action adventure, no profanity, no sex, appropriate for people in my family to read series, which will hopefully be coming out soon-ish. Maybe, I don't know.
Working on it.
We're working on it.
Mary Chris, what about you? You have big news, actually. This is very
Yes. So How to Be Alive, which actually Julia helped title. So critique partners can also be helpful in that way.
That's my one thing. You're not getting anything else out of me because I'm horrible at my own work. I'm just awful. And that person who sits there and has like Untitled as the title for a good 2 months or so.
Well, my novels are always called like the main character's name. So it was Jen's novel. And then I had like How Not to Be Alive or something a little more negative, and you put that nice positive spin on it. So anyway, so How to Be Alive will be out by the end of this month, or either early July. I'm still working on some launch details, but it's very close. It's back from the copy editor, so that leaves me just formatting. I have a cover and a spine and a back cover. Super excited because this book is actually going to be in print, which my other novel is ebook only, and so I'm really excited to actually physically be able to hold my book. Super excited about that, and have it available for my readers that way. So if you're interested in details, I am going to be sending out early details and actually have a little bit of an early reader program, meaning not critiquing, but just taking a look at early. So if you're interested in that, head over to my website, which is in my bar below me, chrisescobar.com. If you sign up for my email list, you'll not only get my weekly blog in your email, but you'll also get information about taking a look at my novel a little bit early, but it'll be available to everybody no later than the middle of July, but probably much earlier than that. So super excited.
Trying to push it out before RWA takes over your life.
Absolutely, yes.
I can't believe how fast that's coming up.
It's
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's right around the corner, and I'm really excited. And that's actually what our next round of first drafts is going to be about. We're going to do 2, we think, in the month of July.
Yes.
Dealing with why you should go to RWA and also what you need to know to be prepared, which I really wish that there had been somewhere where all that information was consolidated into one thing that I could kind of put on in the background while I was doing dishes and things like that last year, because it is hugely overwhelming, and also there are some things you should know that sound really straightforward and simple, like have business cards and have pens, but until somebody says it, sometimes you're going through your packing list and you miss things. So hopefully we can kind of alleviate some of the pre-RWA stress for some people and kind of let you know what you're going to expect. Maybe you'll find your critique partner. We don't know. We hope you will. So I'm working on two big things right now. I'm neglecting edits for a novella that is coming out in, we believe, early November, maybe late October if we push it out early. And that is with Alexis and also Audra North and Alexander Houghton. And it's very exciting. We're all kind of starting to really bring everything together and gel, and it's all about a week at a resort, and all the characters know each other. So I was describing this to somebody the other day, and I'm giving some very convoluted, horrible description of it, and I said, oh, it's like Love Actually. And I was like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, all the interlocking stories, it kind of is like Love Actually. That makes a lot more sense. So it does. It focuses on 4 different couples, and all the characters they're going to make appearances in everybody else's novel. So it's kind of nice. You get everybody's story as you go along. So that is what I'm neglecting right now, and what I've been working on quite a lot in between traveling and a crazy work schedule is a 1920s novel, which I actually kind of like the working title for. It's called Death of Flapper Queen, and it's all about a woman who's a society columnist in 1925 in Manhattan, and the rather sexy detective who comes along to solve a murder that she has gotten herself wrapped up in, kind of as a side character. So she's helping him out, and I actually just wrote the scene where he finally admits that, yeah, she's kind of helpful. So yeah, now they're gonna have sex, so it's gonna be great.
He's super sexy, and I love him.
I'm not making you wait like 200 pages like I have in the past with some other stuff. So I'm really excited about that, and it's been a lot of fun, and I basically get to sit and talk about Chanel dresses and learn about clothes and how people did their hair, and I'm reading fantastic research stuff, so we should at some point talk about research, contemporary and historical, and everything in between. But that's my very long answer with what is going on right now. Mostly I'm really excited for RWA and our RWA first drafts, and perhaps we'll see some special guests with that as well. So that is all for us. I think we clocked in at 1 hour and 2 minutes, so that's
right.
probably enough from us. But yeah, we will be back, and we'll give a little bit more notice next time. This was kind of something that came together quickly, so hopefully you'll all find this helpful, and we'll talk to you in July. Bye, everybody.